Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm your host Sandman. Today we're going to be talking about lock lubricants. Let's get into it. So I used to be of an older mindset that if you apply a lubricant to a lock, it makes it harder for picking the lock. And that's an old locksmith like wives' tale. And essentially, when I was a locksmith, we used dry graphite lubricant and we used Triflow. And we would use dry graphite lubricant on new locks, any type of lock that we had come into the shop that we were, if we were putting together the core for the very first time or repinning something and, putting in new pins, we would take this bottle of graphite and we'd pour it along the top, this nice little line of graphite in there, and then we'd put the plug in the core, and then we would, move it around and work it in. Brand new locks, graphite works really great, but dry graphite alone is granulated. And over time, as it builds up moisture, if it builds up, just water from rain, or if somebody were to, God forbid, use WD-40 and never use WD-40, but if somebody were to put WD-40 inside a lock that has graphite in it, it will gunk it up. It'll just make it garbage and crappy because graphite is granulated. It's a wonderful dry lubricant, but it is granulated at the end of the day, and it will start to feel gunky, and it'll feel like sand in the lock over time. Now, how long that time is depends on the elements and the environment that it's in. It could happen in a couple years, but probably 5 to 10 years, you're going to start seeing those things. So brand new locks, we were putting the dry graphite lubricant in. The locks that were coming into the shop that needed to be cleaned, that were too corroded, and there was, all types of, stuff happening to the springs and the pins, we would use a Triflow lubricant that we would spray in there. And that seemed to work pretty well. And, I have no problems with that. Since then, I've come up with some other methods, and I'd like to share that with you today. So if you are watching this, you're probably a lock sporter and not a locksmith. However, I'm going to relate some stuff that may help both camps. So as a lock sporter, we keep our locks on our desk. Sometimes we put them on the couch. Sometimes we put them on the bed. Sometimes they're on the floor, on the carpet. So if we are going to do that with our locks, and they need lubricant, because some of these cheaper locks, they come so inexpensive, such as Master Locks and Brinks, or any of the Chinese security locks that are Master Lock clones. A lot of those come without any lubricant, or they just have a short shelf life for that lubricant. It's a cheap lubricant, so they're dry by the time they make it here to America, wherever it is they come from, South America, or those locks come from China. So we do need to lubricate the locks. However, if you are planning on keeping those locks indoors, I would like to recommend Triflow for your locks. If you are going to put locks on your shelf, on your desk, whatever, if they're going to be in the house, use Triflow, because Triflow is clear. Triflow comes out clear, so if it gets on your clothes, if it gets on the carpet, if it gets on anything, it's going to come out pretty clear here. Now it's still probably like a machine oil in color if you have enough of it, but it's not going to be such an obvious stain as going to be my next suggestion. So I'm recommending Triflow, and we'll talk about why I'm recommending that over the Houdini here in a second. If you are going to have locks that are going to be exterior, exposed to the elements, okay, then so let's say your door locks or a padlock to your gate, whatever, maybe you have a trailer hitch lock, you can use Triflow just the same. But my favorite lubricant of them all is going to be this Lock-Ease graphite fluid. Now, this is graphite, but it has naphtha in it. Naphtha is essentially just this butane lighter fluid. That's all it is. Naphtha and butane lighter fluid, to my knowledge, is the exact same thing. And it evaporates super quick. It's very penetrating. It cleans better than Triflow, in my opinion, and it evaporates completely. And so what happens is when the naphtha solution evaporates, all that's left is the graphite itself. So this is my choice for using on exterior locks. And if you've ever worked with dry graphite, you will remember several times when you go to pour a line of that graphite across the top of your pins, and you just dumping a quarter of your, a quarter of the container onto just one lock. Like, it is super messy. I used to go home with my hands just completely black. It sucked. All my clothes were stained. The carpet was stained from my clothes or my hands. I hated graphite, and this is going to do the same, but it comes with the Naphtha solution. We'll talk about how to apply this. I would use that for your exterior locks, and I'm going to show you how to apply it for locks that you keep indoors too. Let's talk about Houdini. So Houdini is favorited in the community as well. It's not much different than Tri-Flow. I realize that it says it's a no Teflon, no silicone, no grease, no oil, no graphite, no gum up, anti-rust, no corrosion. I get that, but when I put this sucker in my hand, even though it has a high evaporative effect, I've always felt like this stuff just never really like dries quick enough. Like, I always felt like, I realize it's not an oil. I don't like the smell. I don't like the aerosol smell, and I just feel like it's just I feel like this attracts more crap than it is going to prevent crap from being attracted to the lock. Now, someone might be saying, Sandman, don't spray it in your hand. You're going to get cancer. Guys, I'm 40 years old and I fought in 2 foreign wars. Something's going to kill me, and it's not going to be Houdini. So I'm not too worried about it. But the other thing that I don't like about Houdini when I have used this to clean locks is this nozzle is not going into that keyway. Anytime I spray this keyway, it's just going to splash right back at my face. There's so much power in this aerosol can that, man, it just makes more of a mess than it does solve problems for me. I think this is a great option if you have a lock that just needs to absolutely just be flooded with a solvent. This is a good option. I still think there's better options than this. So I'm not a fan of this at all. And I realize it's very popular. There's nothing wrong with it. I used to use this for all of my interior locks until I started using Tri-Flow recently. So this was my interior lock solution. This was my exterior lock solution, the Lockies. Sometimes when you have a lock, like, this is actually a challenge lock that I need to pick and send back. But sometimes we just get these really old beat up locks, okay? And these things, you go to try to pick and the pins aren't even moving. The pins are completely seized. What do? Well, 2 different things. You can use Kraken brake cleaner, and specifically the Kraken Bond with the purple label here. This was recommended to me by a locksmith. He was like, dude, if you ever come across any like gate locks that are just absolutely seized, he goes, just spray some Kraken brake cleaner on it and come back like in an hour or 2 and it's completely cleaned up. And I have experimented with that, and it is absolutely true. You do not want to use this indoors. You do not want to inhale this, and you definitely want to wear gloves when using this. But I will sometimes take a Tupperware container, a plastic Tupperware container, and I will put a lock inside of that, and I'll fill it about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, just enough to get the parts soaked in this Kraken brake cleaner. Doing this outside, and I will leave it outside for 24 hours, and the brake cleaner will almost completely evaporate, and everything's unseized. Alternatively, a lighter solution would be to use the butane, which is essentially naphtha. So it's just an alcohol, and it's a light petroleum distillate. So I use this actually as a luthier. So as a luthier, someone would bring me a guitar and ask for a guitar setup or ask for a repair. And if it's an electric guitar, I will take the hardware from the bridge, and it may be rusted. It may have some like sweat or grease, or grime or something that has built up on the threads where the saddle needs intonating and the saddle wants to move left and right on that bridge. So I will take all the hardware and I'll actually soak it in naphtha, because naphtha is really easy on hardware, especially chrome hardware or hardware that you don't want it to actually necessarily like damage the hardware. I don't think Kraken would damage the hardware over time, but we use naphtha. We also use naphtha with the woodworking when we're going to go lacquer something. Before we apply the lacquer finish, like let's say a nitrocellulose finish, we will actually take naphtha or this, and we'll take it and we'll put it on a paper towel, and we'll wipe down the wood. So that way any finger oil from your hands touching, the wood is not going to still be on the wood. This will actually clean up the oils from your fingertips. Otherwise, if you grab raw wood that you have sanded to like a 400 or 350 grit and you touch it, and then you go to hang it up in a booth and you go to paint it and you touch it with your fingers, you will have a thumbprint that is forever underneath that lacquer finish. So we use this to clean wood, and we use it to clean metal parts. So it's just super evaporative, man. And so it's very non-invasive kind of. I'm using words I don't even know what they mean, but it's always been helpful for me. Now, someone may say, well, naphtha is not the same thing as lighter fluid. It's not this, dude. It's damn near. I'm pretty sure it's all the same shit. So, but I've been using this to clean guitar hardware, and I've used this to clean locks as well. So if you have a lock that needs to be absolutely cleaned, I wouldn't even mess with the cleaning lubricant protectants, these CLPs. I would just go with the naphtha solution or a brake cleaner, and then I would wipe it off with a paper towel or a junk towel like this, and make sure you wipe it off very well before you start touching it with your hands. Naphtha is not really super bad on your hands as much as the brake cleaner here. I mean, yeah, obviously you probably want to wash your hands after using this, but so I'm not a fan of the Houdini. I don't like the aerosol cans. I have the Luckies in an aerosol can. I'm probably never going to use this because aerosol is just too much pressure. I really like these squeezer bottles where you just squeeze out a couple drops for like a second or two. The last thing I want to talk about is high security locks like this Medico. Medico locks have such tight tolerances from the manufacturer that they actually have their own recommended Medico brand lubricant. And it has been described to me from a locksmith that it's similar to like a Teflon in the sense that it leaves like a very light coating, so it evaporates and it leaves like a light coating that, you can't really see it with the eye. I don't even know if you can feel it, but that coating is what provides the lubrication and the protection. I will tell you that I was talking to another locksmith, and he was like, if you use WD-40 or something dumb, if you even just use Houdini on these locks, and then you were to send this lock into Medico, you're actually voiding the warranty that you have on a lock from Medico. That's what he told me anyway. So I believe that. I just remember that we had a special lubricant spray for Medico and Multi-Lock that was in its own cabinet, and it was like, do not use unless the manager's watching you, because Mike was a dick. Just kidding. So Mike, the manager of that shop, and he was a jerk, they were very adamant on using a very special lubricant. So as it pertains to high security locks in your collection, if you keep them indoors and they're inside in a controlled environment, you don't need any type of lubricant on these locks whatsoever. Metal on metal is fine. It's no different from when I was a Marine overseas in Iraq. We didn't put CLP on our rifles because we're in a dusty environment. We might take a drop and put it on our bolt carrier group, so that way if we had to fire our weapons, carbon would not immediately just build up and collect on that bolt carrier group. There'd be some type of layer of protectant on the bolt carrier group at the very least. But ideally, because I was an artilleryman and I wasn't always going on outside of the wire on missions or anything like that, we would just keep everything dry. And keeping metal on metal contact, as long as the metal's not moving and creating friction, it's fine. And metal also has a bit of a porous memory in the sense that when you do apply an oil or a grease or a CLP or anything like that, the metal will actually absorb a little bit of that. So it looks like it's dry, but there's actually some inside of what I would say little microscopic pores of the lock or the gun or the metal, whatever it is. Metal is somewhat porous and it will somewhat absorb any of these chemicals. So you don't have to put a lot. When I clean my rifle, you can get away with just one drop of CLP on your index finger, and that can clean an entire bolt carrier group, as I mentioned earlier, and the inside of an upper receiver. So as it pertains to high security locks, just keep them dry and they're going to be fine. You don't need to add a lubricant to them. But these smaller locks with the looser tolerances, and it's brass on brass versus steel on steel. Man, I don't know if it's the brass because it's maybe more absorbing to any of the chemicals that we apply to it, but I don't know, man. For some reason, the grease or the lubricant seems to work its way out of these locks. So let's talk about how we're going to apply this. I'm going to use I'm going to use the graphite solution on the white banded one, and I'm going to use the trifo on the blue banded one because I've been trying to decide which one I like best. I've already decided I really like this lock ease the most, but I'm experimenting with the triflow. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure it's closed, and I'm going to put my rag over the top of it, and I'm going to shake it up because that graphite likes to settle to the bottom given that it's granulated. And the oil likes to rise to the top. And it's not an oil, I apologize. It's a naphtha solution, so it's an alcohol. So I'm going to open that up. I don't want to squeeze it, otherwise it's going to start bubbling out here. And then I'm going to take my lock, and I have the pin stacks on the top here. As I would pick the lock, I'm going to flip it upside down so the pin stack is on the bottom. I'm going to take the nozzle, I'm going to marry it to the keyway here, and I'm going to squeeze for 1 second, and that's it, just one squeeze. And then I'm going to take a rake, or I can take a key, and I'm going to work those pins. So that way I can get my penetrating oil into the lock here. So then I'm going to wipe that off there. And then I'm going to see if there's any excess coming out the backside here. It doesn't look like it, so I didn't put in too much, so that's good. And I'm going to tap it, see if there's any excess in the front. That looks good. And then I'm going to go ahead and see if I can pick it. And I'm going to be honest, the wives' tale of not using a lubricant because it'll make it harder to pick is just that. It's just a wives' tale. Lubricant absolutely makes these locks easier to pick. It really does. And I pick the same locks over and over. I have 100 locks that I work through several times a week. And you have to add lubricant over time. And I will notice, I'll be like, man, this lock is so much harder than I remember. And then I'll add lubricant, and all of a sudden I can pop it in a couple seconds. So that's what you want. Obviously, it may be a little bit harder to put placement of your pick onto a pin, given that there's now a lubricant involved. But I'm using a gym hook here in 19,000, so it's basically a pointy diamond. And I'm having no problem touching these really small master key pins here, which are smaller than most residential and commercial size key pins. So it's just a wives' tale. Don't be afraid to add a lubricant to your non-high security locks. So anything green belt and lower, or maybe even some blue belt locks like interchangeable core locks, don't be afraid to use a lubricant on those locks. That's something after 15 years I'm now doing more and more often. In fact, when I go to a locksport meetup or lockpicking competition, I'll be taking my graphite solution with me. I just picked this up and it already started to squirt at me. So you got to be careful with this guy. I'm sure the comments are going to have fun with some of the things I'm saying here, and a lot of innuendos there. But now we're going to take our master lock here. We're going to do the same thing with the triflow. I would pick it in this position with the key pins up on top. I'm going to flip that upside down. I'm going to just place this right on top of the key. I'm going to squeeze for 1 second, and that's it. I'm going to dry it off on the front. I'm going to push on the shackle on the back, see if there's anything coming out the back. Nope, nothing there on the back. I'm going to do that in the front. Let's work those pins in a little bit. And I want to work the pins in with the pins on the bottom. I don't want to tip this upside down just yet. Now, obviously, since these are cleaning lubricant protectants, it would probably actually take a good couple hours for the cleaning to actually penetrate, maybe even 24 hours. But these locks, I've been using lubricant on them on a regular basis, so it's not too bad. You don't have to wait too long. I'm really just lubricating them. I'm not really cleaning them. They're not sitting outside. I take care of them. They're in my house. So let's see. Let's go to pin 4 here. Wait, hold on. Okay, pin 4. Got a big click out of 4. Pin 2. Some of these are just harder than others. Oh, I'm getting close. I need one more pin to go. There we go. And we got an open. That's awesome. Wow, this banding is really loose. That's crazy. So another thing you could do, whenever I get some of these locks from, like, let's say I'm cleaning up a bridge that's being vandalized by love lock enthusiasts, and there's a sign that says, do not put locks on the bridge because it's a safety hazard, and people still do it anyways to profess their love to some girl that they're going to break up with 3 weeks later. I will also lubricate these areas here. I'll either add lubricant here or add them right here, and then I'll just pop it in. I'll go ahead and show you how I do that. So there's already grease on this. I really don't want to mess with the grease, but I could just pop just a little bit of lubricant there and bop right just like that. You got to make a sound effect when you do it too. If you don't make a sound effect, you're not doing it right. So that's it. That's all I have for today, folks. Let me know in the comments down below, what is your favorite a lubricant to use with locks. I get it if you're a big fan of Houdini. I was too. I just don't like the aerosol. And every time I use Houdini, my house smells, my lock smells, my hands smell. I'm not a fan of the Tri-Flow, just seems a little less invasive. I really like using this graphite lockies, but you have to use a minimum amount if you're going to use this on locks that are inside your home so it doesn't stain your carpet or your shirt or anything like that. This is really better for the outdoor locks, and this is really better for the interior locks. Let me know your comments down below, and I will catch you guys next time.